So without further ado, I'd like to start formally, and to introduce our first speaker is Professor Stan Scott of Queen's University Belfast. Stan is a professor of computational science in the School of Electronics, Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at Queen's University Belfast, and his talk is partnering with SOS UK, Engineers Without Borders and Solitest to deliver education for sustainable development in EECS. So again, thank you, Stan, for being our first speaker in this seminar, Sustainable Education, a Circular Approach. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Damien. Queen's University's Strategy 2030 refers to embedding the UN Sustainability Development Goals across all our activities. So within the Faculty of Engineering and Physical Sciences, we set ourselves three questions. Where are we on our sustainability journey? How can we contextualize technical content within an ethical, economic, and environmental framework? And how can we conveniently raise sustainability literacy across all staff? To help us address these questions, we partnered with SOS UK, Engineers Without Borders, and Solitest. And I'll now take you on a whistle-stop tour of each of these partnerships. To find out where we are on our sustainability journey, we needed to map our current education provision onto the SDGs, and we used module descriptions as the key input. Now, we believe that partnership with students is a key driver for our success. So we joined forces with the student-led education charity, SOS UK, and participated in their student-led SDG curriculum mapping program. Throughout the month of October, 22 students in EPS conducted a curriculum audit of 474 undergraduate and postgraduate modules. Prior to the mapping exercise, the participating students attended a training workshop facilitated by SOS UK staff, and they explored the SDGs and examined how to audit against module descriptions. The student auditors assessed SDG knowledge against the 17 SDGs. But more importantly, they examined wider aspects of sustainability. So, for example, did the module develop expected graduate competencies, such as taking real-world action? Did it involve challenging business as usual? Did it involve critical thinking skills, collaborative problem solving? Was there an ethics and values component? Were students able to see the bigger picture? Did they understand sustainable development? And thirdly, they examined how the module was delivered. Did it use problem-based learning? Did it involve experiential project work, simulation, stimulus activities, or case study? Now, for each module, a score of 0, 1, or 2 was assigned. 0 meant there was no coverage. 1, that there was a little or implicit inclusion. And 2, that there was significant or explicit inclusion. And the auditors were encouraged to provide textual comments on missed opportunities to include sustainability within a module. These diagrams give an overview across the faculty. Similar information is also provided school by school. The slide on the right shows that explicit SDG knowledge is clearly embedded within modules right across the faculty. Slides on the left are a bit more encouraging, with competencies such as critical thinking and pedagogies such as problem-based learning scoring highly. The exercises proved valuable to us to give an initial understanding of how well sustainability is currently embedded within the faculty's education portfolio. And follow-up meetings are being held with module owners to discuss the raw data for their module, and to discuss how sustainability knowledge, competencies, and pedagogies might be embedded further into the module to enrich its learning outcomes. And we believe that teaching sustainability in an instrumental way by simply calculating carbon budgets and linking to projects to the SDGs that they impact is insufficient. As engineers, we're good at delivering technical skills, but we need to recognize the wider picture and to contextualize technical content within an ethical, economic, and environmental framework. The Engineers Without Borders Engineering for People Design Challenge is one way to approach this. The design challenge uses a project-based learning pedagogy and is supported by a comprehensive design brief that enables student teams to investigate the challenges faced by a real community and to design a solution to meet the community's needs. Each year, a new design brief is developed. Last year, it focused on a fishing village in Peru. This year, it's on inner city Glasgow. The brief is comprehensive, covering the area's history, culture, geography, demographics, and economy, and is supported by case studies involving actual people in the community workers, local councillors, people on the street. And the challenges typically center on the built environment, transport, energy, water, food, sanitation, waste, and digital communications. And the design brief and the challenges can be used flexibly, either as a new module, within an existing module, across one semester, across 2 semesters, or as an intensive short project. So we've been experimenting with it in Queen's, and my colleague, Ian O'Neill, has incorporated aspects of the design brief into his software engineering and systems development module. This is a second-year double module with over 300 students. Sustainopoly is a board game like Monopoly. To give authenticity to the way the game unfolds, the students have to identify and describe a real-world sustainability-related problem, design a solution, and show how the design can be realized. And the design brief from Engineers Without Borders provides the real-world sustainability-related problem. So, as an example, if the design brief indicates that a community doesn't have adequate access to the internet, they might have to take action themselves by creating a community network. So instead of accumulating streets, houses, and hotels, as you would in traditional Monopoly, the players might be involved in identifying sources of funding, acquiring expertise to ensure the community network can be properly configured, purchasing the hardware to establish nodes, seeking permissions needed to gain access to certain sites for physical infrastructure. And what attracts us to the design challenge is that it contributes to the Engineering Council's requirement for students on accredited degrees to have a broad awareness of the economic, legal, social, ethical, and environmental issues within a design project in the context of engineering. So our third question was around sustainability literacy. So to raise sustainability literacy across staff, we've partnered with Sullytest, whose online tool is designed to raise awareness and improve understanding of the 17 SDGs. Led by an independent NGO and co-created with a community of users and a network of contributors, Sullytest is supported by more than 40 international institutions and networks, including UNESCO. The test, which takes between 20 and 45 minutes to complete, is undertaken anonymously and consists of 30 multiple choice questions with at least one question on each SDG. So here's a typical question. Among the following statements, 3 are related to the linear model based on production and consumption. Only 1 relates to the circular economy. Which one relates to the circular economy? After making your choice, the correct answer is highlighted, feedback is given, and additional resources are signposted. Now, these results then can be collected and displayed, for example, per SDG, to show how well the cohort understands each SDG. So, for example, the questions on SDG 3, good health and well-being, 83% got the correct answer, 13 opted for I don't know, and 17% gave an incorrect answer. The results can also be displayed across 4 knowledge themes defined on the right and compared against country respondents and global respondents. So this cohort outperformed the UK and world responses in how an individual can effectively create change, but underperformed in awareness of human constructed systems. So in conclusion, within the faculty, we now have a better idea of where we are on our sustainable journey and what needs to be improved. We have a means of incorporating the 3 pillars of sustainability, the economy, the environment, and social justice, into project-based engineering modules. And we're beginning to raise awareness of the wider aspects of sustainability across faculty staff. And that's the end of my talk.
Many thanks, Stan. I really appreciate your talk, and what is obviously a huge amount of work, and the rewards I know will be reaped into the future. And I also want to thank you to Smaller Sense, excellent timekeeping, where we now have gathering minutes for questions and answers at the end. So without further ado, I'd just like to introduce our next 2 speakers. We have both Cormac McMahon and Mick McKeever from TU Dublin, whose talk will be on sustainability in the curriculum. They've taken the risky strategy of having 2 on the 1 talk. I hope it goes well. Cormac is a senior manager in sustainability education and innovation at TU Dublin. He has long experience in the energy sector before coming into the light, if I can say that, of university education. He's a rich set of qualifications, but I hope he wouldn't mind calling him a mechanical engineer at heart, since I think that's Cormac's primary degree. We have Mick McKeever, also from TU Dublin, a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment at TU Dublin. He's been there since 1997. Mick has a very interesting range of qualifications, going from electrical to mechanical engineering, but it all seems to dovetail wonderfully to his keen interest in sustainability and renewable energy. So again, just to thank 2 speakers, and whenever you're ready, please go. Thank you.
Thanks, Damien. You can hear me okay there, and you can see the slides? Perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just introduce the topic. So, just to acknowledge some very interesting reflections there from Stan and his presentation. I think we share much of the same experience at TU Dublin. We've been using Sully Test for a while, and we're faced with the same challenge of mapping our course descriptors and our curriculum to the Sustainable Development Goals. So we're going to zone in a little bit with a narrower focus in this presentation, based on some work Mick and I had done as part of a project funded by the Higher Education Authority. The project was called Transform Edu, and there was a particular work stream as part of that project that focused in on sustainability mapping. So I think just again, I know everyone has seen the Sustainable Development Goals at this stage. I think what is probably particularly useful about the UN Sustainable Development Goals is that they do provide a very broad, integrative framework for thinking about sustainability. And, you know, if we reflect on engineering curricula in general, I would have said, in the past, we were probably particularly strong on some particular sustainable development goals, let's say like renewable energy and clean energy, and perhaps climate action. But we mightn't have been as strong on others, particularly the social goals around poverty and education and access to health and gender equality and so on. So there's I think it's a particularly useful framework to try and conceptualize sustainability and what it means for our education provision. And UNESCO have a very good resource called Education for the Sustainable Development Goals Learning Objectives, which can provide a nice way of thinking about how you might frame the curriculum from an SDG perspective. The other aspect to, I think, the challenge that many universities are now facing is how we actually map our education provision to the Sustainable Development Goals. And the example that Stan gave there of SOS UK is a really good example. Two others that I've come across, so UCC have an excellent SDG toolkit that can be used in a sort of reflective manner by academic staff and students, and De Montfort University have an excellent SDG planning toolkit as well. One of the approaches that we've taken at TU Dublin, in addition to the sort of reflective exercise that needs to be done with staff and students, is to perhaps take a more systematic approach. I.e. look at the text within the course descriptors and see, is there a mapping of that text to similar texts and narratives that you would see within the Sustainable Development Goals documentation. And obviously from our own perspective, in the engineering profession, it's now very clearly part of the accreditation criteria for academic programs. You can see there it's listed as a very specific program area, and within the actual criteria, you'll see there that the UN Sustainable Development Goals is quite clearly articulated as the blueprint for how we might think about this. But also, I think what's really interesting is if you look at the competencies for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals that's listed in Engineers Ireland and documentation, they are reflected in a number of other education for sustainable development documentation that has been published, let's say, within the last 2 or 3 years. The most prominent or the most recent has been the Green Comp framework, which is the European Sustainability Competency Framework, which provides an excellent reference point for thinking about the key competencies that we need to try include in our curriculum. So I'm going to jump over to Mick now, who's going to talk a little bit more about the sort of systematic method that we've used as a complementary tool to the more reflective exercises that we would do with staff and students.
Thanks, Cormac. Will you just drive the slides for me?
Yeah, you just shout, slide. No problem.
Okay. So the system that we use, we developed an automated system to look at the catalogue of modules within engineering in TU Dublin. And the framework around which that is working is the ASHE STAR system. And the accreditation, obviously, in terms of sustainability, there's different levels of badges, but to attain any of the badges, there's a scoring. And if you look in the top right box there, you'll see that of all the points, the major points are going towards academics. There's 58 points there. And of that, there's 40 going towards curriculum. So in terms of the curriculum, it's crucial in terms of the STARS credit system that you extract the information and you display the level of sustainability within all of the modules within your engineering programs and elsewhere. And if we look in the next slide there, Cormac, if we look in the next slide, all of the modules under the ASHE STAR system, well, there's 3 categorizations of the modules. So there's modules that are sustainably focused, so there's quite a high focus in on the sustainability element of the learning. Then there's modules that are less sustainable, and they refer to those as sustainably inclusive. And then there's obviously the modules that have no sustainability element in them, maths, etc. So in terms of the modules, not every module has to actually score sustainably focused or inclusive. We wouldn't expect that. But overall, across the modules, there should be an element of sustainability within what the learners are being allowed to be exposed to over the 3 or 4 years of their level 7 or level 8 program. And within that ASHE stars, then what we have done is we've developed a piece of software that we will take the module descriptor and we will put the module descriptor into a program, and it will go through the module text and it will examine the text that is whether it's sustainably focused or if it's sustainably inclusive or there's no sustainability element in it whatsoever. So it gives us a scoring system, a weighting system, and each of the modules then can be added up together to look at each semester, term or year, and then obviously over a whole program, it's sustainability. And that also aligns very closely with PA7 of the accreditation with Engineers Ireland, where the sustainability has been also examined. In fact, it allows you to look at the modules themselves and to tailor them in such a way that what you may have intended and has not been picked up as sustainable learning can actually be identified by looking at the way in which things are expressed. And obviously then the learning that underpins those particular activities within a module itself. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of detail in what we did in terms of trying to find or mine through the module descriptors for each of the programs within our engineering programs and within the Faculty of Engineering. So probably the easiest thing for us to do is to let you know that we've published 2 papers. One's a computational approach to evaluating circular alignment, the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, and that publication is now available. And we're just about to publish a second paper related to the validation of the computer program. So we'd invite you to have a look at the particular papers there if you have interest. We can't really go into much detail in the 10-minute presentation, but just to say that currently we are now investigating funding to commercialize a piece of software that we have, perhaps with some provider of education software. And we're hoping that it will be an automated tool that will allow program managers, etc., to actually do the sustainability audit in a fast process and to have a consistent standard process so that modules can be compared across programs, across schools, etc., so that there's a homogeneous approach. So here's an example of the type of information that we would generate if we were to put in a program. So things that you would put in will be the module descriptor, its title, and then from the module descriptor, we will extract what are called root keywords. So for example, here we have on the first one there for mechanical H4023 in our program in TU Dublin. Some of the words that come up are sensor, industrial, and there was energy. Those are the key root words. But when we looked at the ASHE categorization, there was no sustainability included. So that's in red. If we had a module that was in the middle, sustainability in mind is our term, you'll see there it comes up in orange. And then obviously there's a module there, which is our sustainable energy system. That's a level 8 fourth year module. And in that, obviously, you'd expect it to be a sustainably focused module, which our tool demonstrates. And it also indicates to you the UN SDGs that the module is addressing in part. And there's also a score then that's given to rank how close it is in terms of the levels between sustainably focused to sustainability in mind and no sustainability included at all. Next slide, please. So there's other useful resources there if you're interested in finding out about how this is done. There's some publications here giving you a background of what related to sustainability and developing tools to do curricula auditing, especially now in the light of sustainability. And we hope that maybe anybody there who's interested might want to talk to us if they have some problems that they'd like to address and maybe see if our tool is useful. We're obviously looking to see, can we bring this out to all the academics within Ireland, etc., and obviously try to make this a much easier task and try to have consistent sustainability across all engineering programs. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Many thanks to both of you, to Mick and to Cormac, for your talk. And again, I always think it's wonderful to see such innovation in education as you've exhibited as our first speaker. So with that in mind, we move to our next speaker, is Cormac Madden from the ESB. Cormac has been in the, if I can call it, the electricity industry for 35 years, I think, including 18 years with the ESB. He's had a huge amount of influence and impact in the ESB, including the towards the ESB's current commitment to net zero carbon emissions by 2040. And in his current role, he's responsible for thought leadership on sustainability leadership. And Cormac has a bachelor's degree in electronic engineering, a master's in business studies, as well as a variety of other qualifications too long to mention. And he's also a chartered engineer for 30 years. So thank you very much, Cormac. And without further ado, I will let you speak on integrating sustainability into everything we do at ESB. Engineering meets social good. Thank you, Cormac.
Thanks very much, Damon. And just to say, it's a great pleasure to be here and to have this opportunity. So I thought I'd do a very unengineering thing and kind of look at, I suppose, the people impacts of all of this, which is really a common theme the more you kind of read into sustainability. So I'd like to just use then our experience in ESB, where we are, what we're doing just right this minute, I suppose, as an example. So as Damien correctly said, we had originally a strategy in 2017 that was really based around some of the thinking then, which is more like 2-degree compatible. And we updated this about a year ago with the net zero goal by 2040, as Damien said. But within that strategy then, we had a commitment, because we realized sustainability is much wider than climate. Now, climate is our main impact, so you've got to start there. But it was actually much wider. So we had a commitment in the strategy to step forward, as we put it, on social and environmental responsibility. So we've been spending some time figuring out what that means and putting targets on it that we intend to publish, so that we can be accountable and report against them. So I started off with this slide. A lot of you would, I think, have seen something similar before. This is a concept brought forward by John Elkington in 1994, which I think still has a lot of validity, and that's sustainability as, if you like, a balance between considerations of planet or environment, people, and profit. And the important thing for me in all of that is balance. And some of these concepts were developed a little further by Kate Rayworth, who a lot of you would have come across, in the concept of donut economics. And it's a pity in a way it's named something like that, because it's actually a very serious concept. But the thinking is balance again. Can we develop the economies of the world where people don't have the basic needs up to the point where we meet, if you like, a social floor for human well-being, and where humans can kind of have a meaningful life and, you know, enjoy life, etc., but not go too far beyond that point where we hit, if you like, an ecological ceiling. So again, the concept of balance, it's actually a dynamic balance between those two considerations. And we're seeing that writ large right now in the whole COP process internationally, because the COPs are more and more revolving around the fact that developing countries want to develop further, and developed countries want to limit emissions. And it's almost got to the point where developing countries are saying, well, we're not going to do much on emissions, even though they're going to suffer from it, unless developed countries help them to foot that bill, because they're being asked to develop in a sustainable way. But developed countries have used, if you like, the old ways of doing things to become wealthy. So it's a really deep and kind of powerful kind of subject. So Maureen, if you could change the slide, please, that would be great. Great. So the EU, as it often does, has looked at this particular problem, and it came out with a whole pillar, a finance pillar, to their EU Green Deal. And it divided sustainability into what I call 9 pillars. I find this a very useful way to think about it. We have to unify it afterwards, of course, do a synthesis after, but in breaking it up, they broke it into 5 environmental aspects and 4 social aspects. But what was really important here, and it doesn't emerge until you really read into it for a while, fundamentally, the EU is also concerned about that balance that I mentioned a little bit earlier on. They want all these non-financial aspects to be put on an equal level with the financial aspects. So what they're asking in some of the directives that are coming is that every company report in their annual report all of these non-financial impacts, provided they're material. And the idea is that information will be audited in much the same way as the financial information is audited. So it becomes that triple bottom line that basically companies are reporting on all aspects of their performance. And it comes back to the basic concept, and Paul Pullman, who's a very famous figure in sustainability, who was the CEO of Unilever, would put it, is the world better off because your company exists when all things are accounted for? So in other words, you could be in a particular industry where you're doing a lot of extraction of a natural resource and you're making big profits. But if you actually account for the environmental damage and the social harms that you may or may not be causing, depending how you run your company, it may actually be a net negative. The world may be better off without you. That's kind of what it comes down to. So companies like ESB are looking at how will we report against all of these? How will we put systems in place in order to manage the metrics and the risks around all of these in order to do our reporting? But the challenge is a bit more fundamental. So we decided to take this framework and apply it to our business to kind of see, well, okay, how do we bring sustainability into everything we do? Because that's what the EU is really saying. Like the title of my talk, what they're saying is sustainability isn't a department over to one side, like the Carlsberg Complaints Department or something, that, oh, they do the sustainability and the rest of the business gets on with the job. Everybody really has to integrate it right in, which is a lot of what the previous speakers were talking about in bringing it into the engineering curriculum. And the implication is engineers are bringing it into whatever they're doing, whatever aspect of engineering they're in. So if you could bring it on to the next slide, please, Maureen. So this is like a really simple way of looking at what ESB is planning to do. What it does, maybe has done up till now in its history, but what it's planning to do in that net zero goal. And basically, we were trying to look at, well, where are our impacts on those 9 sustainability pillars in the work we plan to do? A lot of what we have done in the past will be discontinued because it's part of the old way of doing things. So obviously coal-fired electricity plants and so on. So we kind of thought, well, the place we should start is what do we need to do in order to reach net zero? But actually, our strategy is a bit wider than that. We have a networks business. So we have to develop the electricity system further so that transport and heat can be decarbonized and electrified. So the distribution system, which was built in a very parsimonious kind of way, was never really designed for electrification. So we have to change that in order to enable it. So we're not only bringing our own emissions down, we're enabling all of Ireland to bring their emissions down as well through electrification. So we're addressing climate, and then you can see the highlighted triangles there. The next thing is, in order to do that, we're developing and installing energy systems for the future. So I like to think of it as the energy system of the future, end to end, from generation, our own generation, and connecting other people's generation as well through our networks business, which is ring fenced, and transmitting that energy, making the distribution system more intelligent, adding sensors and so on, and reinforcing it. And then retrofitting homes. We have a retrofit business, and we also have an EV charging network as well. So we're involved in the whole thing end to end. So in doing that, if you click on then, Maureen, we're relying on certain factors. So we're relying on our people. We need to recruit over 1,000 people because we're more than doubling our investment, because this business is kind of capital intensive. Running costs are very much lower than fossil fuel, but there's a lot of capital involved. So we need to attract and retain talented people to get this done. And then in doing the work, if you move on to the next slide, Maureen, we're impacting automatically on communities, because every time we develop a new site to build a wind farm, we're in a host community, basically, that we need to interact with in a positive way. We're also interacting with biodiversity because we're dealing with greenfield sites. And then there's resource use. We've all heard about the challenges around wind turbine blades, disposal, and so on at end of life. So we need to think about those. And there's also batteries, there's grid batteries, and then there's PV panels. in some cases, which may have human rights implications as well, depending on the source of the panels. So these are impacts we're automatically having on the world through the climate work we're planning to do. And ultimately, we're trying to serve the interests of the customers. So if you move it on again, Maureen. So basically, these are our key impacts. And then on the next slide, the implication is we want to make those impacts regenerative in time. Now, regeneration, in other words, say an example, biodiversity, leaving a site that we, a greenfield site that we build something on, biodiversity positive. So there's more biodiversity on it when we finish rather than when we started. And that's an obvious example. Nobody's fully cracked regeneration, but in order for the environment and society indeed to heal, we're all going to have to aim at these regenerative impacts. So that's kind of how we're thinking of it in terms of our business. So if you move it on to the next slide, Maureen, we came up with a leadership statement. I'm not going to go through it, you'll be relieved to know, which the chief executive sent out to all the employees before Christmas. But basically it committed to this concept of regeneration and further electricity as an enabler of social regeneration. So we went back into our past and we looked at some of the social revolutions in Ireland we've already been involved in. So electricity coming into Ireland on a large scale, which was revolutionary at the time, and then bringing electricity to every home in Ireland, which I think Ireland was one of the first countries to actually do that. And that transformed rural life, and it allowed people to study for degrees or to study, stay in school longer and get into university because they had electric light to study by, etc. A lot of other changes. And what's going on now is actually a third revolution, because it's going to reduce or eliminate air pollution, which kills 1,000 people in Ireland every year. A lot, and together with a lot more environmental benefits and health benefits as well, because our homes will be better insulated and be healthier places to live in, etc. So that's really how we envisaged it. And there's work now going on to put actual targets and key actions against all of these. So if you move on to the next slide, Maureen, please. So we came up with this kind of framework where we took these main impacts and we have kind of commitments there. And then on the next slide, if you can. Yeah. While this work goes on, we're really linking it back, as I was saying earlier, to our founding purpose. And I suppose a point to make is to be a sustainable company, and I'm only learning this and researching as I go along, but there's also a lot of thinking right now in management around purpose-driven organizations. And really, it's kind of the same thing, because to have an inspiring purpose, it has to relate to human well-being. Are you actually helping human beings through your business? And that is really what is an inspiring purpose, but it's also a compass then. By having a purpose that's built around that, but it relates to your business, how your business helps. And people have a compass within your company to assess their decisions. Is it advancing this purpose or not? They don't have to go back to the 9 topics to do it. So part of the work we're planning now is in fact to raise this awareness right throughout the company, because literally everyone in the company has to bring it to their particular role. So listen, thanks again for the opportunity and for your attention.
Many thanks, Cormac, for that. Again, excellent perspective from, again, I think a leader in this area. And again, thank you for your contribution today. And our next speaker is Dr. Richard Manton from Engineers Ireland. Richard is the interim registrar and chief risk officer at Engineers Ireland. He has a BE in civil engineering, an MA in financial management, and a PhD in civil engineering. And he's also a chartered engineer. And Richard's talk today is guidelines and good practices in embedding sustainability in engineering education. And again, this is could be a huge talk, I know, and but I think Richard, I hope, will give us some insights from Engineers Ireland and also good pointers as well as to how we can best not just prepare for accreditation, but also to be aware of what's best practice in the field as well. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you, Damien. So in this talk, I'll just very briefly introduce Engineers Ireland's overall commitment to sustainability. Then I'll spend most of the talk on guidelines, so that being how sustainability is covered in the accreditation criteria, and then just finish off with some points on good practice and our academic society. So starting then that Engineers Ireland, I think, has very much increased our commitment to sustainability over the past 3 or 4 years. But since our declaration of a climate and biodiversity emergency on the 4th of March 2020, which was the World Engineering Day for Sustainable Development, we've really sought to embed sustainability in everything that we do as the professional body for engineers in Ireland. So if you refer to our statement of strategic intent, you'll really see how sustainability is embedded in our vision and right through our objectives. In our sustainability framework, then it's how we seek to implement that commitment into each of our actions, and that we adopted a learn, live, lead, link framework for how exactly we would implement sustainability. And then most recently, we've developed a sustainability plan for last year and this year that includes 20 different actions that I'd encourage the attendees to take a look at. Just very briefly, some of the highlights over the past couple of years. We adopted new accreditation criteria that I'll mention today. We've hosted a whole series of webinars. We've started to upgrade our building at 22 Clyde Road. We've published reports. We've signed partnerships such as with DPA and hosted various conferences. So again, this for us is quite a holistic view of sustainability. We're really then turning to the topic of today's talk. But within the sustainability framework, the learn pillar relates very much to the embedding of sustainability throughout engineering education. And the very first action is how we would support third level institutions in embedding sustainability. That's why I was very glad to be invited on this talk. I'm very glad to see the leading role that the Academic Society plays in embedding sustainability in engineering education. So before I go into the detail of our accreditation criteria, I just wanted to really introduce the role of our accreditation. That this is an outcomes-based process, that we look at the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities of graduates upon their graduation. That generally our process then relates to bringing a visiting panel, we review evidence, we interview students, graduates, employers, and we meet with staff. It's quite a wide span in our accreditation, that we look all the way from higher certs at level 6 up to masters at level 9. We cover both universities, technological universities, institutes of technology, and that our criteria are written in such a way to cover all engineering disciplines. This is something that we've been doing as well for quite a long time now, for more than 40 years, with over 200 currently accredited programs. Some of the benefits I think that our accreditation brings is that it's a quality assurance mark, that I think that gives confidence to students, to parents, to industry, and so on, about the quality of the graduates emerging from accredited programs. Those graduates can also then go on to apply for our professional titles, be that chartered engineer, associate engineer, engineering technician, as indications of their professional competence to practice. And then it opens up really a world of possibilities in terms of traveling around the globe with your engineering qualification. So this is just a very quick snapshot just of the various international agreements we have through the International Engineering Alliance and the European Network of Accreditation of Engineering Education. Really that there is a world of possibilities there for graduates of accredited programs. So turning then to the specifics of our accreditation criteria, which have been referred to by a couple of speakers, that again, we do have other resources here on the accreditation criteria, so I'll very much just focus on the sustainability aspects today. By means of introduction, you'll note that they're structured into 3 parts. They're the program outcomes. That's really what graduates need to know and be able to do upon graduation. There are program areas which more relate to descriptions of the curriculum that we think needs to be covered in order to go on and achieve the program outcomes. And then there's program management, which is more the operating environment of the program. So again, these are just some of the resources that are available on our website. So you'll see that we do have the criteria and the procedure up there, and we have a whole series of webinars related to the criteria, the procedure, and different aspects then, such as ethics, engineering management, and so on. But of course, the reason we're here today is to talk about how sustainability is embedded. So I will move on to the new program area. I first wanted to focus on the program outcomes and just give you some examples of how sustainability are embedded in each of them. So PO2 relates to problem analysis, very much how problems are scoped out by engineers. So you will see there how we've added the phrase just at the end, professional responsibilities towards people and the environment. that where a problem is being analysed or scoped out, that engineers should have that ability to consider people and the environment. So I was very glad to see how Cormac there talked about both the people aspect as well as the natural environment. The second one down there on design. So again, and this goes back to some of the points made in the earlier talks, which was that when designing solutions to complex problems, that engineers should be able to consider the professional responsibilities, again, towards people and the environment in their designs. PO5 then, which I think many of our attendees today will be very familiar with in the context of sustainability, is professional and ethical responsibilities. So this is where in accreditation visits, we probably see the most thorough evidence of sustainability. So for example, you'll see there a reference to environmental, social and economic impacts, as well as the principles and practices of sustainable development. But again, I would very much emphasize that there are aspects of sustainability that run right throughout the program outcomes. And certainly you could make the case that the program outcomes list at the bottom of the slide, for example, teamwork, communication, management, and others also make important contributions to sustainability. Turning then to the program area. So this is a new addition to our criteria, which I know Cormac introduced. So again, you can look at the detail in our criteria document. We just wanted to pick out some of the key aspects. One is, again, just that emphasis on the 3 pillars of sustainability, of environment, of society and economy. Secondly, then, that we identified some, I think, particularly important concepts. Some of them are new, some of them certainly aren't that new, but that we believe that students should be introduced to as part of an accredited program. Again, I think these will serve the students very well once they go out into the workplace. Thirdly, then, which Cormac highlighted, was that in this program area, we highlight the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals, and that we recognize also how certain SDGs may be more relevant for certain branches of engineering, but of course, within our accreditation criteria, we try to be independent of the discipline and to allow that flexibility for the programs. And then lastly, we refer to the competence framework, and Cormac, I know, picked out some other relevant competence frameworks that have been published more recently, but just they show how I think there are certain competences that are particularly important for engineers to develop in order to support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we've listed some there and tried to link them back to our own program outcomes. So then I think quite importantly, and something that we're regularly asked by academics before we go on accreditation visit, is how exactly we evidence sustainability in our accreditation submission. So we've just briefly picked out some ways I think this could be achieved. One is in the self-assessment report, that when you as an academic are looking at your program and how you implement the criteria, that you would give us good descriptions under each of the program outcome headings in terms of which are the strong modules that contribute to that program outcome, and then you may like to highlight the sustainability aspects of those. Also in the descriptions of facilities and the management of the program, for example, it's quite common that there would be examples of campus projects, such as green campus projects that students may be involved in. So again, those could potentially be picked out there. Moving on then to the evidence. So this is supplied in advance of the visit in an electronic format, but where we ask for module descriptors and learning outcomes. So to go back to Mick and Cormac's presentation, I think the writing of learning outcomes in the module descriptors, and even more important than that, how they're assessed, are extremely important in the area of sustainability. So one, in terms of that you're not just embedding content, but that you're very clearly designing that into the learning outcomes and also designing it into the assessment. From the Engineers Ireland perspective, that's quite important because we need to be able to see evidence in order to accredit and to show the achievement of the program outcomes. But also for these ranking methodologies that Cormac and Mick introduced, they often rely on the learning outcomes or the descriptors. So again, please pay particular attention to those, particularly in the area of sustainability. And then finally, when we do visit you on campus, when we carry out interviews online, and then when we meet your program team in person, again, we're obviously very interested to hear the sustainability impact of your program. So then finally, moving to some examples of good practice. But at Engineers Ireland, we are currently undertaking some research based on permissions from HEIs to look at how exactly the different HEIs are describing their achievement of the sustainability aspects of the accreditation criteria. So that is some research that we do hope to submit to the upcoming CEFI conference to be held in Dublin later this year. But for now, I would really suggest that you refer back to the 2 academic society webinars that were held in February of 21 and February of 22. I think there's a fantastic array of good practice that was presented as part of those webinars. So you'll see the YouTube links there, or you'll find them on the Engineers Ireland website. And really, I think you need look no further than the academic society for really the best practice on sustainability in education. So I just picked out some examples here from a whole 10 different HEIs. So you'll see that there's really different strategies that are used. It can be the embedding of sustainability into the teaching. It could be student projects, the FYPs that are carried out. There are certain partnerships that are done with community groups. There are other on-campus projects that are used. So again, would really recommend that you take a look back at those 2 webinars and to engage with the academic society on communicating best practice in this area. So that's all from me. Damien, thanks very much.
Many thanks, Richard. And I have to say, I've really enjoyed the way in which speakers have all themselves been actively listening to the other speakers and then drawing it into their own talks. I have to thank you for that. It's really valuable. I don't really have much extra to say. I just to summarize, I hope the listeners today have seen that we've tried to draw speakers from academia, from industry, as well as from the professional institution as a means of holistically looking at this topic. And again, I hope that it has given some insights, at least to what could be best practice for those that wish to embed it further in their education. The only other thing I was going to say is a parting word before I pass to Beatrice with the Q&A is it dawned, well, not dawned on me, but it with so much division, I suppose sustainability is something, at least one thing again, we can add to that, which I think unites our humanity with a common responsibility, and it sort of advances as well with collaborative effort. And I'd just like to mention one book, if I could be so cheeky, that I read many years ago and read recently, and indeed this morning when I was perusing the free books at the university library, it was actually there. So to prove you, I actually have it with me here. And it's The Small is Beautiful, Subtext Economics as If People Mattered by E.F. Schumacher, published in 1973. He was the first person to identify the concept of what's called natural capital. You know, the idea that industry shouldn't treat their raw materials as sort of income, but rather as capital, something that can be exhausted, and therefore, you know, it's akin to burning the furniture to keep warm. And he also, I think, very importantly suggested a lot of problems aren't wholly solved technically, but actually sometimes it involves philosophical understanding of what we do and why we do things and ways in which we can do them better. So hopefully some of what was talked about today will again advance the idea that sometimes we have to make philosophical considerations as well as technical as educators and practitioners.